Chapter 76 The Abyss. Beyond the western edge of the Ashen Barrow, the landscape of the forgotten shore was not at all like what Sunny had expected, and hoped, to see. On this side of the island, the slope was much steeper. At the spot where it was supposed to end, the familiar sight of the flat wasteland was nowhere to be seen. Instead, the ground continued to slope downward at a less drastic, but still considerably sharp, angle. It continued far into the distance. In fact, the whole island appeared to be standing on the edge of a colossal depression in the earth, one that stretched as far as the eye could see. With its edges slightly curved, it resembled a giant crater left behind by an unimaginable impact. From what Sunny was able to observe, the crater's diameter could only be calculated in hundreds of kilometers. The roots of the giant tree, which could be seen protruding from the soil far below, seemed like tiny blades of grass in comparison to the sheer size of the abyssal chasm's wall. It was like the whole world was tilted on its side, making Sunny's head spin. In short, there were no more high natural features to the west of them. The only way forward was to go down, with no hope of finding shelter from the crushing torrents of the dark sea. Which meant that there was no way forward at all. Their journey to the west had come to an end. And with it, all hope of finding a gateway to the real world was lost. Sunny stared at the desolate landscape, feeling rage and disbelief clawing at his heart. He just couldn't believe that all their struggles were for nothing. But the proof was right in front of him, real and undeniable. Damn it! Damn it all! He tried to think of some cunning way to solve the situation, but there was nothing his imagination could come up with. The dark sea with all its horrors drowned the world every night, and the only way to escape it was to climb high enough before the sunset. With no heights anywhere in sight, what could he do? Sunny glanced at Nephise, who seemed to be even more crestfallen than him. Her face had turned into an icy mask, a dark look full of bitterness and resentment in her eyes. He opened his mouth, trying to come up with something to say, but no words came to his mind. In the end, they both remained silent until the distant rumble announced the return of the dark sea. Deep in the colossal crater, dark torrents appeared from beyond the horizon, rushing to fill it to the brim. A little bit stunned, Sunny watched as the water level rapidly rose, finally turning the endless chasm into a vast sea of black. Then, it began to overflow, sending an unstoppable flood of water into the wasteland. Flowing past the Ashen Barrow, it rushed inland, crushing against the coral of the Crimson Labyrinth. Soon, the whole world was covered in seething black water. Sunny licked his dry lips and turned to Nephise. After a short pause, he said in a raspy voice, "I think we found the source of the dark sea." She lingered, watching the last rays of sunshine slowly disappear from the sky, then turned to him with a grim expression on her face. "Let's head back." All three of them felt lost and heartbroken because of the terrible discovery. Cassie in particular seemed to be utterly shocked. "It doesn't make sense, it just doesn't," she mumbled on their way to camp. "How could it be?" Gripping Sunny's shoulder, she quickened her step and asked, "Are you sure that there's nothing higher than the sea level out there? Are you absolutely sure?" He sighed, feeling his mood turning even darker than before. "Yes. We looked quite thoroughly. The whole land just goes down, down, and down. It stretches to the horizon, as far as we could see, in all directions except for the east. The Ashen Barrow is right on the edge." The blind girl shook her head. "But how could it be? I've seen that we had reached the castle. There must be a way." Sunny remained silent, not knowing how to answer. If there really was a way, he had no idea about it. After a few seconds, Nephise answered instead of him. "We will try to come up with something tomorrow. Worst case scenario, we'll have to go around the whole thing." Sunny trembled at the thought. A journey like that would take months. To circle around the colossal crater, they would have to cover many times more distance than they had in the prior weeks, each day bringing the risk of stumbling onto something beyond their ability to resist. and each night bringing the risk of something stumbling onto them. The chances of surviving several months in this hellish place were nothing if not abyssal. Ha ha! Abyssal! With a grimace, he tried to not think of the worst-case scenario. The darkness of the fallen night was not the best environment for scary thoughts. Tomorrow. We'll rest, recharge, and think of something tomorrow. It is just like Cassie said, since she saw us entering the castle, there must be a way. They reached their temporary camp just before the sun had completely disappeared. Lying on the makeshift bed of fallen leaves, Sonny tiredly closed his eyes and thought, I hope I won't see any dreams today. Then, he slightly frowned. Dreams? Since when am I capable of dreaming in this place? Oh, right, there was that one dream, or was it a memory? What was it about again? I can't seem to remember. With that thought disappearing from his mind, he fell asleep. In the morning, the mood between the three of them was pretty somber. No one seemed to want to talk or do anything, aimlessly staring at the ground or the rustling leaves of the great tree. In addition to the blow of yesterday's revelation, they were also hungry. The corpse of the carapace demon was starting to look more and more appealing, at least to Sonny. However, he was still not at the point of breaking his promise to Cassie. Finally, Nephi's broke the silence. Standing up, she looked up with grim resolution and said, I'm going to climb to the top of the tree and take a look around. Maybe I'll notice something that we missed from up high. Sonny stared at the giant tree, suddenly feeling incredibly small. It was truly enormous. The ashen barrow itself was already much taller than the giant knight statue and every other shelter they had seen, and the tree almost dwarfed it in size. Climbing all the way up would take a lot of time and effort. But maybe she would really be able to notice something from that incredible height. He scratched the back of his head and said, All right. But be careful. Keep an eye on the sky. If you notice those winged abominations again, come back down. Changing Star gave him a nod and headed for the tree. Without turning her head, she calmly said as a farewell, Take care of Cassie while I'm gone. It shouldn't be more than a few hours. Sonny waved a hand and watched her walk away. Then, he tried to think of something to do. On a usual day, he would have already started his morning training. But today, he was too hungry. Come on. Hunger is not an excuse. Do you think you'll always have a full stomach before a battle? No. So get up and train. Don't you want to try how the midnight shard feels in your hand? With a sigh, Sonny got up. He trained for an hour, enjoying the swift and reliable feeling of his new sword. The long tachi was truly incredible. It was light, maneuverable, and unrelenting. Its edge sang as it cut the air. Sonny already felt as though it was a part of him. His movements were fluid and measured, almost elegant. After the training session was over, he decided to do something useful. Walking over to the carapace demon's corpse, Sonny spent some time prying the soul shard out of it. In the end, he gathered all three of the crystals with some effort and stashed them into the seaweed rucksack. What to do now? After a bit of pondering, he suddenly got an idea and tried to find the place from his memory, the one where the carapace demon had dropped the transcendent soul shard into the sand. That shard had been brought to the ashen barrow by the subservient centurion, and would be a real treat for Neff or Cassie. He quickly found the right spot. However, no matter how hard Sonny looked, he couldn't find the alluring crystal. In the process, a couple more hours had passed by. Stank. It was quite large. Where could it be? He was determined to continue the search. But at that moment, the shadow that he had left with Cassie noticed movement in the branches of the great tree. Nephis was back. Sonny walked back to the camp, thinking about what she had found. Was there hope for them after all? Or was there only more bad news? By the time he returned, Neff and Cassie were sitting on the ground with relaxed expressions on their faces. She saw something? Sonny thought, suddenly excited. But in the next second, his eyes widened. The two girls were holding something in their hands, their lips painted red. They were eating. They were eating the fruits of the great tree. Chapter 77 Enthralled. Sonny stumbled and looked at his companions in utter shock. Nephi and Cassie were each holding a large, round, glistening fruit. The skin of these fruits was smooth and black as onyx, while the succulent insides were red as ruby. Their hands, chins, and lips were smeared with red juice, making it look as though they were feasting on blood. The air was filled with an alluring, sweet aroma. Sonny recoiled. But his stomach involuntarily growled, reminding him how hungry he was. Nephi looked at Sonny and offered him a relaxed smile. "Hey!" He stared at her, lost for words. Finally, after a few seconds had passed, Sonny collected himself and screamed. "What do you mean? Hey! What the hell are you doing?" His voice was loud, full of disbelief and anger. Both Neff and Cassie turned to face him. They were visibly confused. "Why are you shouting?" Sonny gaped at them, feeling like he had lost his mind. Why were they so nonchalant about this? What was going on here? Trying to find some sense in the situation, he took a cautious step forward and looked at Nephi. Did she, wait, what was he thinking about? He was so hungry. It was hard to concentrate on anything except for food. Shaking off the unexpected memory lapse, Sonny remembered what he was about to say and pressed. "Why did you change your mind?" Changing Star frowned. "Changed my mind? About what?" He clenched his teeth, thinking that she was trying to fool him. "About the fruits. I thought we had agreed to avoid eating them." Nephi blinked, a confused expression appearing on her face. "Did we? Why?" Sonny opened his mouth to answer, but then froze. Actually, why did they make that agreement? I can't quite remember. He was sure that there was a reason, but his memory was completely blank. There definitely was an agreement, wasn't there? He was pretty sure that there was, at least up until a few moments ago. Now, however, did he imagine the whole thing? There really was no reason not to eat the alluring fruits. Especially when the three of them were so hungry. No, wait, that's not right. Are you all right, Sonny? He flinched and glanced at Nephi, who was looking at him with concern. Suddenly, Sonny felt lost and confused. What were they talking about? Something about some sort of agreement? What agreement? Not knowing how to answer, he just stood there with a frown on his face and pouted. Ugh, this is embarrassing. Did I completely space out while she was talking to me? Fortunately, Cassie quickly came to his rescue. She always knew how to make the situation less awkward. Are you angry because we started eating without you? He looked at her and noticed the big, delicious fruit in her hands. His stomach growled. So hungry. I guess? Cassie smiled and pointed to the ground, where another fruit was placed on the pile of fallen leaves. Her teeth were smeared with red juice. Don't worry. Neff brought 3 of them, 1 for each. How nice of her. Sonny picked up the fruit, looked at it, and took a bite without thinking. Instantly, his mouth was filled with delightful, cool sweetness. The succulent, juicy fruit was probably the most delicious thing he had ever tasted. It was both nourishing and refreshing, with rich texture and soft, lingering aftertaste. The ruby flesh practically melted on his tongue, making his whole body tingle. It was pure joy in the form of a fruit. Wow! Despite his delight, Sonny felt disturbed for some reason. Something was very wrong about the whole situation. But what? Taking another bite, he frowned and tried to understand the source of this anxious feeling. It was hard to think about anything except for how heavenly the fruit of the soul tree tasted, but he forced himself to concentrate. Soul tree? Since when? Wait, don't get distracted. Sonny was finally able to pinpoint the source of the strangeness. It was his shadow. When he reached out to pick up the fruit, the shadow did not copy his movements, as though reluctant to touch it. Even now it was motionless, refusing to mimic him eating the fruit. Weird. What is it with this guy? Sunny took one more bite and looked at the shadow, lost in thought. The shadow had an eccentric temper, but it rarely did something without a reason. If it didn't like the fruit, there had to be something wrong with the fruit. Sunny frowned, suddenly feeling a sense of dread grip his heart. There was something wrong with the… Damn, why is it so hard to think about this stuff? There was something wrong with the fruit? Why would there? Wait, is this why I screamed at Nephi's? She broke an agreement. What was the agreement? Sunny was at the precipice of remembering something very important. He felt as though he just needed to pull on the thread, and the whole truth would reveal itself. Something terrible was going to happen if he failed. But then, Sunny got distracted. Something unexpected happened, something that required his full attention. Instantly, he somehow forgot all about the problem with the soul tree's fruits. Because at that moment, the spell was talking into his ear. Your shadow grows stronger. What? He blinked, then looked at the delicious fruit in his hands. The spell announced the increase in his power right after Sunny swallowed his third bite. Stunned, he raised his head and looked at Nephi's. Changing Star, too, was staring at her fruit with a strange expression on her face. Feeling his gaze, she looked up. Sunny licked his lips. Did you? At the same time, Nephi said, I just absorbed a point of soul essence. Without saying anything, they both turned to Cassie. The blind girl was enthusiastically devouring the fruit. Red juice was flowing down her chin and dripping to the ground. Stopping for a moment, she smiled. Actually, I received mine a few bites ago. Sunny's eyes widened. Excitedly, he summoned the runes and found the right cluster, shadow fragments, 97/1000. He really received a fragment. He received a shadow fragment without risking his life in a battle against deadly monsters. Finally, Sunny was able to realize why the carapace demon had been so fixated on the soul tree and its fruits. These fruits were pure magic. Forgetting all about the uneasy feeling, he raised his hand and greedily bit into the succulent, delicious, nourishing flesh. Late in the evening, when the sun was already hidden behind the horizon and the dark sea had once again turned the Ashen Barrow into a lonely island, the three of them were preparing for the night. They had moved their camp to rest between the roots of the great tree. With newfound energy received from consuming miraculous fruits, all their worries seemed to fade. With no way to move further west, Nephi's, Sunny and Cassie had decided to rest for a few days before making any decisions. They deserved a short vacation. The Ashen Barrows was a perfect place to recuperate. There were no monsters in the surrounding wasteland. It was large enough to protect them from the horrors of the sea, and they had plenty of food thanks to the soul tree. What's more, that food could even provide them with power. Where else would they be able to grow stronger without risking their lives? As far as hell goes, this place was almost a paradise. Sunny lay on the makeshift mattress of fallen leaves, feeling relaxed and optimistic for the first time in many, many days. Things seemed to be getting better. Before falling asleep, he glanced at the mighty branches of the great tree and thought with a bit of regret, with the carapace demon gone, there's no one to protect this magnificent tree anymore. When we continue our journey, it will be completely defenseless. What a shame. His consciousness was already half asleep. However, one last thought entered Sunny's mind right before he completely slipped into the embrace of darkness. What a shame that no one will be here to serve it, and feed it, and help it spread its seeds. Chapter 78 Bliss. In the morning, Sunny was woken up by the gentle rustling of leaves. Opening his eyes, he saw rays of sunshine falling through the scarlet crown of the soul tree, painting the world in soft shades of pink. The sight was beautiful and tranquil. It felt as though none of the dangers and terrors of the dream realm could reach him here. A soft breeze touched his skin, bringing with it coolness, and the smell of fallen leaves. For the first time in a long while, Sunny felt at peace. Is this what a vacation feels like? If so, their decision to have one was the best decision ever. He sat up with a yawn and lazily looked around. Cassie and Nephias were already awake. Seeing them put a smile on Sunny's face. Why the hell am I grinning? Shaking his head, Sunny put on a serious expression and said, "Good morning." The girls greeted him. Then Nephias slightly tilted her head and asked, "Hey, do you remember why we didn't leave anyone to keep watch last night?" Sunny blinked. Indeed, why hadn't anyone guarded the camp? No. I guess we were too tired. Plus, it's so safe here. Why deprive ourselves of sleep? She frowned. Sunny expected Changing Star to berate them, but, unexpectedly, she just shrugged. I guess. Huh. That's not like her. Am I not the only one in a great mood? To make Neff feel better, he pointed down and said, "Don't worry. My shadow would have warned us if anything had happened." She seemed to have forgotten about her question already, returning to whatever she had been doing before. All three of them were easily distracted these days. Sunny sighed. "So, what are you guys going to do today?" Cassie turned to him with a smile and answered in a teasing tone. "Nothing. We're on vacation, remember? So we're just going to rest and relax." Sounds like a plan. Speaking about plans. At that moment, Cassie scowled and said with a comically strict expression, "You too, Sunny. You are not allowed to plan, plot, and scheme. Just sit back and enjoy the day. All right?" Sunny scratched the back of his head. All right. He felt as though he was forgetting something. But what? Looking at Nephias, Sunny hesitated and asked, "Remind me, why did you climb the soul tree yesterday?" She glanced at him in confusion. I don't really remember. To get the fruits?" Sunny smiled at the mention of the miraculous fruits and nodded. "Yeah. That makes sense." A few days passed by. Sunny, Nephias, and Cassie spent them idling away, not concerned with anything in the world. Their tired bodies and minds needed time to rest. They slept until noon, ate the delightful fruits and sat around the fire, talking or simply soaking in the warmth. Sometimes, they would play games or engage in other forms of entertainment. Other times, they would keep to themselves, enjoying the almost forgotten feeling of privacy. Sunny had been a loner for most of his life, so these past few weeks that he had spent side by side with other people, without even a minute to himself, were a taxing experience. He relished the opportunity to be alone with his thoughts once again. Luckily, the island was large enough for the three of them to stay apart if they didn't wish to be disturbed. Not that it happened often. At first, he had expected that lazing around doing nothing would very quickly grow boring, but surprisingly it did not. He felt perfectly fine simply laying on the ground and staring at the gently swaying branches of the soul tree, caught in a blissful reverie. In moments like these, he would lose track of time, often realizing that entire hours had passed only when the sun was about to set. The concept of time, in general, had become strangely hard to grasp. Sunny wasn't entirely sure how many days they had spent on the peaceful island. He was pretty sure that it was less than a week, but couldn't remember the exact amount. Not being able to remember something had become a common occurrence. All three of them were turning increasingly absent-minded and forgetful. Sometimes, Sunny would catch himself straining to remember details of his previous life or notice the strangeness of their behavior. But a minute later, he would forget about these concerns, distracted by some innocuous thought or occurrence. His memory was becoming hazier and hazier. The only clear things in it were how delicious and refreshing the magical fruits were, how pleasant it was to live under the shade of the soul tree, and how magnificent it was. The tree was beautiful, benevolent, and generous. It protected them from the cursed blight of the Crimson Labyrinth, kept the monsters away, and provided nourishment both for their bodies and for their soul cores. Sunny was becoming increasingly convinced that finding the majestic soul tree was a true blessing. The thought of leaving its gifts behind and returning to the horror of the outside world seemed less and less attractive. Why leave when they were perfectly happy here? Well, at least two of them were. While Nephi's was as carefree and tranquil as Sunny and Cassie in the beginning, as time went by, she grew strangely despondent and gloomy. It seemed as though she had reverted back to her old, distant, and unsociable self. Instead of chatting or relaxing with them, Changing Star ended up spending most of her time sitting on the western edge of the island alone, staring into the distance with bleak eyes. Sunny had no idea what was wrong. He was worried about her. Not even the frequent, insistent lapses of memory managed to overcome his concern about Neph. On one of the evenings, Sunny approached the western slope of the island, feeling as though his head was about to split from pain. For some reason, he kept forgetting the reason for this visit on the way here. It took all of his willpower to hold on to his intentions. He wanted to check on Nephi's. Just like always, she was sitting at the ridge of the western edge, gazing into the distance. Sunny climbed onto the ridge and sat down, looking at her with hesitation. "Hey, Neph!" Changing Star glanced at him. Her indifferent expression was back, making any attempt to understand her true emotions futile. However, it was clear that she was not all right. "Hey!" Sunny scratched the back of his head. Was he seeing things, or was her hair a bit longer than before? "Why aren't you enjoying the vacation?" Changing Star frowned. After a while she said, "Don't we need to keep moving west?" He raised his eyebrows, surprised. "West? What is in the west?" Neph's frown deepened, turning into a scowl. I don't remember. But I feel. She grew silent, then said quietly, "I feel like I have to do something very important." Abandon the soul tree. What a strange idea. Sunny pondered for some time, trying to understand where she got the idea that they had to move somewhere. Finally, he asked, "Why west, of all directions?" Nephi's turned to him. There was a strange, pained expression on her face. Gritting her teeth, she whispered, "I don't know." Sunny sighed. If she didn't know, then he, of course, had no idea either. All he knew was that he wanted to make her feel better. But how? Sunny frowned, trying to think of a way. He felt that there was something very obvious that he was forgetting. Something that would instantly erase Neph's suffering. When the realization hit him, he froze. Of course! How could I forget? The answer was so clear. He just had to climb the soul tree and find an especially juicy fruit for her to eat.